There inevitably comes a specific quiet moment when a narcissist realizes something they never believed could actually happen. You have finally reached a point where you have stopped caring. You have ceased the endless chasing. You have stopped trying to explain your perspective, and you are no longer fighting to save the relationship. When this realization sinks in, it does not bring them a sense of peace or acceptance. Instead, it almost always triggers a deep, frantic panic. Rather than quietly accepting that you have made a decision to move on, they become unpredictable and volatile. Their emotions begin to spiral, and before long, they reach for the most calculated, strategic tactic they have left in their arsenal. What makes this final desperate move so particularly dangerous is that it rarely appears to be manipulation on the surface. To the outside observer, or even to you in the heat of the moment, it may look like genuine, heartfelt change. It might manifest as intense remorse, overwhelming displays of affection, or perhaps an sudden, unexpected crisis that demands your immediate attention and care. But beneath that carefully constructed, polished appearance lies a completely different, darker purpose. Learning to recognize this specific pattern can save you from months or perhaps even years of agonizing emotional confusion and repeated cycles of heartbreak. If this message feels like it is speaking directly to your situation, take a moment to support Psychology with Ramani by liking this video. Your engagement helps ensure that more people have the opportunity to recognize these harmful behaviors before they become trapped by them. I would also love to hear about your own experiences in the comments section below. Have you ever stood back and watched someone's entire personality seem to shift the very instant they realized they were losing their grip on you? The moment a narcissist senses that their emotional control over you is slipping away, something fundamental shifts inside them. This reaction is not fueled by true love, deep longing, or a sincere, humble desire to repair the bond you once shared. It is entirely fueled by the raw, terrifying fear of losing the dominance they thought they possessed over your emotions. For a person with these traits, maintaining emotional superiority is absolutely essential to their functioning. They do not just want your simple attention. They rely on your deep emotional responses to sustain them. Your frustration, your guilt, your desperate attempts to defend yourself, your endless, exhausting explanations, and even your sheer confusion all become vital sources of validation for them. Every single emotional reaction you give them serves as a reassurance that they still hold significant influence over your life. However, everything shifts when you become emotionally unavailable. When you finally stop arguing, when you stop trying to defend your character, and when you stop allowing their toxic behavior to dictate your daily peace, they experience something that feels like a profound psychological blow. Their fragile sense of superiority begins to crack. In their distorted view of the world, you were never supposed to walk away emotionally. They fully assumed that you would always remain attached in some form or another, whether that was through your lingering hope, your fear of conflict, your sense of moral obligation, or your crushing guilt. They truly expected that no matter how difficult things became, they could always manipulate you back into the cycle. When that emotional connection is finally severed, they are left to confront the one thing they fear more than almost anything else: the reality of becoming irrelevant. To a narcissist, losing their relevance means losing their significance. It directly threatens the identity they have spent so much time carefully building around the idea of being the absolute center of your emotional world. Your newfound indifference communicates something they simply struggle to accept. It tells them that their manipulation no longer works. It shows them that their mind games no longer have any impact on you. It proves that their attempts to control your internal state have lost all of their power. That is the primary reason why their behavior often becomes so incredibly inconsistent during this phase. One day they may lash out at you in a fit of rage, and the next day they may seem desperate and pleading for a fresh start. They might disappear completely without any warning, only to suddenly return with tearful apologies, forced affection, or dramatic, empty promises of how they have finally changed for the better. At other times, they may resort to seeking revenge or attempting to provoke your jealousy. Although these outward behaviors appear to be vastly different, they are all driven by one single underlying objective: to make you feel something toward them again. It honestly does not matter to them whether that emotion is love, anger, guilt, sadness, or hope. As long as you are emotionally invested in the situation, they still have a connection that they can manipulate. What truly threatens them is not your hatred. It is your total indifference. Emotional detachment is the one thing they cannot easily control. They are experts at exploiting your empathy. They are masters at manipulating your sense of guilt. They are highly skilled at taking advantage of your natural compassion and your persistent desire to understand the truth. But they are completely powerless when facing someone who remains calm, emotionally grounded, and no longer feels even the slightest urge to react. The very moment you stop engaging, their familiar strategies begin to lose all effectiveness. When you no longer feel a burning need to justify your actions, defend yourself against every false accusation, or search for some grand sense of closure, the story they have been controlling begins to fall apart. Your silence becomes a force more powerful than any argument you could ever make. The instant they realize that their influence is fading is usually the exact moment that internal panic begins to take hold of them. This is exactly why their final calculated tactic can be so incredibly dangerous to your well-being. It almost always appears just as you are finally beginning to heal. You are finally seeing the relationship with greater clarity. You are recognizing the unhealthy patterns that defined your time together. You are slowly rebuilding your self-confidence. You are strengthening your boundaries, and you are finally reconnecting with your own sense of emotional stability. A narcissist often senses this internal shift in you surprisingly well. They notice when you are no longer reacting impulsively to their bait. They recognize the moment when clear, cold logic begins replacing the emotional chaos they relied on. They can physically feel the difference in the air when your peace is no longer dependent on their approval. That is when they introduce their one final desperate attempt to regain control. It is rarely dramatic or obviously aggressive. In fact, it is usually designed to be subtle enough that it seems completely genuine. It is carefully crafted around everything they have learned about your weaknesses, your values, and your history throughout the relationship. They know exactly which words once softened your boundaries. They know all the deep fears you have shared, the secret hopes you have held on to, and the hidden emotional wounds you have revealed. They understand perfectly well what once made you question your own reality and what used to pull you back into the fold after every single painful experience. So they use all of that gathered knowledge with cold, surgical precision. Perhaps they suddenly offer the long-awaited apology you have waited years to hear. Maybe they reveal an unexpected moment of vulnerability that is specifically designed to awaken your dormant compassion. They might even create a sudden, staged emergency that makes you feel responsible for helping them. Or they may choose to withdraw completely, leaving you in a state of confusion where you question if you have misunderstood the entire situation from the start. These strategies succeed because they are built around your strongest, most beautiful qualities: your empathy, your loyalty, your kindness, and your genuine human desire to resolve conflict. The most important thing for you to understand is that narcissists do not suddenly undergo a profound transformation just because they realize you are leaving. More often than not, they simply change their presentation. The core manipulation remains exactly the same, but it is now wrapped in words and behaviors that appear softer, more sincere, and far more convincing than before. Their true objective is not healing the relationship. It is disrupting your personal healing. They want to interrupt the progress you have fought so incredibly hard to make. They want to plant fresh seeds of doubt in your mind. They want to weaken your growing confidence. And they want to pull you back into the murky, emotional uncertainty where they have always held the tactical advantage. And that is exactly what makes their final move so effective. It does not look like manipulation at all. Instead, it looks remarkably similar to the version of the person you spent so long hoping they would finally become. What makes this final tactic so convincing is that it gives you a brief, fleeting glimpse of the person you always believed they had the potential to be. For one moment, it appears as though they have finally understood the depth of the pain they caused you. It seems like genuine growth. It seems like real accountability. It seems like the massive breakthrough you spent so long praying for. But beneath that carefully staged appearance is something entirely different. This is not genuine transformation. It is not real emotional healing. It is a calculated, cold-blooded attempt to draw you back into a relationship where they once held all the emotional leverage. The ultimate goal is never to rebuild trust or create a healthy partnership. The goal is to restore their control over you. The timing is never accidental. These behaviors almost always appear right at the moment when you have stopped reacting, stopped chasing, and started the difficult work of reclaiming your emotional independence. The instant they sense that you are no longer emotionally available, they begin searching for any small opening that might reconnect you to the toxic cycle. That is exactly why so many people fail to recognize what is truly happening. Once you have made the decision to emotionally detach, the power balance of the relationship changes completely. For perhaps the very first time, the narcissist is no longer the one controlling the emotional atmosphere. They are no longer directing every conversation, influencing every important decision, or determining how you feel from one day to the next. Your calm, centered demeanor becomes incredibly unsettling to them. Your silence speaks much louder than any heated argument ever did. Your lack of urgency tells them they no longer have the same influence over your emotions that they once took for granted. And because they can no longer predict your reactions with any degree of confidence, they begin relying on increasingly calculated strategies designed to pull you back into active emotional engagement. One of the first roles they often adopt in this phase is that of the helpless victim. Suddenly, they are overwhelmed, they are abandoned, they are deeply misunderstood, or they are facing one tragic hardship after another. They may send you emotional messages describing exactly how much they are suffering, how difficult their life has become, or how painful their past has always been. Every word is carefully aimed at awakening your natural compassion and encouraging you to feel personally responsible for their emotional state. If that sympathy does not reopen the door for them, they quickly shift into another version of themselves. Now they become the person who has supposedly undergone a total change. They speak eloquently about self-improvement, the wonders of therapy, their personal growth journey, or how they have finally reached a state of understanding everything you tried to tell them for months or even years. They begin saying exactly the specific things you have wanted to hear for such a long time. Their words sound almost perfect, but you must notice the timing. These dramatic, sudden realizations appear only after you have begun walking away. The transformation conveniently arrives at the exact moment they are losing access to you, which makes it extremely difficult to separate their performative sincerity from their actual strategy. And if kindness, vulnerability, and sweet promises still fail to pull you back into their grasp, another mask will eventually appear. In other instances, they quickly pivot to becoming defensive, openly hostile, or flat out confrontational. They might accuse you of being heartless, insisting that you have suddenly become selfish, cold, or cruel. They will often take the time to completely rewrite the history of your relationship, shifting all the blame onto your shoulders or manufacturing artificial conflicts just to force you into another tense conversation. The specific emotion they try to elicit from you does not actually matter to them, whether it is guilt, anger, fear, frustration, or even sadness. Every single emotional reaction you provide them creates yet another fresh opportunity for them to regain their influence over you. This is precisely why this specific phase of their tactics can feel so overwhelming and exhausting. The constant shifts between these various states leave you constantly wondering which version of them is the genuine one. One day they are deeply apologetic, and the very next day they are attacking your character. Then they might appear vulnerable again, only to become distant, cold, and detached shortly thereafter. That level of extreme unpredictability keeps your mind frantically searching for answers and trying to make sense of the madness. Meanwhile, please understand that they are rarely acting out of genuine confusion themselves. Instead, they are carefully observing. They are paying very close attention to which emotional approach still manages to get a rise out of you. They are testing every button they have learned to push throughout your relationship, hoping that at least one of them will still produce the reaction they crave. What you are witnessing here is not evidence of lasting change or authentic love. It is simply the act of control desperately fighting to survive. When you stop caring, the narcissist experiences something that feels deeply threatening to their very identity. Your newfound emotional independence wounds them far more than any heated argument or dramatic emotional confrontation ever could. As long as you remained emotionally invested, even while you were fighting, you were still providing them with attention, validation, and the constant reassurance that they still mattered in your world. Every explanation you gave, every apology you offered, and every attempt you made to fix the relationship only reinforced their sense of self-importance. Once those reactions finally disappear, so does a major source of the validation they have grown dependent upon. That is the moment when their behavior often becomes even more dramatic and erratic. Their personality seems to change from one moment to the next. At times, they might be unexpectedly gentle and patient. Just a few hours later, they might become cold, dismissive, or openly cruel. Then they suddenly appear broken, remorseful, or emotionally overwhelmed, acting as though they have experienced some profound spiritual awakening overnight. These dramatic shifts are not random emotional outbursts. They are calculated attempts to discover which specific version of themselves still has the power to reach you. A narcissist is constantly watching you for feedback. Every response you give them becomes valuable information. They are trying to identify which mask still opens the door to your life. They may cry and insist they simply cannot live without you. They may finally claim to accept responsibility for their past behavior. They may even share painful childhood experiences or deep-seated unresolved trauma, all in the hope that your natural empathy will override your boundaries once again. If compassion fails to get the job done, they often choose to intensify their efforts. They might become harsh, accusatory, emotionally distant, or intentionally shocking. Their primary objective is to disrupt your emotional stability because uncertainty weakens your confidence, and a confused person is always far easier to influence than someone who feels grounded and certain in their resolve. These emotional swings are powerful because they target the deepest parts of your heart. They aim directly at your compassion, your hope, your loyalty, and your beautiful belief that people can actually change. Before long, you may find yourself questioning everything you once knew to be true. You begin wondering if maybe, just maybe, this time they are finally being honest. You might think that perhaps they have genuinely changed. You might worry that you are walking away just as they are finally becoming the person you have always hoped they could be. That uncertainty is not happening by chance. It is exactly what they intended. The constant, dizzying shifts between affection and hostility are not random outbursts. They are deliberate experiments designed to test the integrity of your boundaries. Because what they truly want is not understanding or resolution. They want total access. They are not searching for a healthy, balanced relationship. They are simply trying to regain their control. Emotional inconsistency becomes one of their most effective weapons in this stage. The confusion it creates makes you question your own instincts, doubt your own memories, and reconsider decisions that once felt completely clear and final. And the very moment that confusion enters your mind, the door begins to reopen. Once you fully recognize this cycle, however, everything starts looking very different. Their dramatic personality changes are not proof of overwhelming love or emotional growth. They are clear evidence of their internal panic. When a narcissist realizes that you are finally slipping beyond their emotional reach, their manipulation does not become gentler or more honest. It becomes more refined and far more intentional. Their priority is not rebuilding the relationship on a foundation of trust. Their priority is reclaiming their lost influence. They want to return you to the familiar toxic cycle where they control the emotional climate, where your mood depends entirely on their approval, and where your energy remains focused on managing their reactions instead of protecting your own peace of mind. What frightens them the most is not your absence or the end of the relationship. It is the loss of the authority they once held over your thoughts, your emotions, and your life decisions. At this specific point, their behavior often becomes remarkably strategic. They begin carefully recreating situations that once made you feel deeply emotionally connected to them. They will bring up cherished memories, private conversations, meaningful places, or inside jokes that remind you of the happier moments you shared. They understand the strong emotional pull of nostalgia, so they use it against you.